Hi, this is Dr. Daniel Roberts, President and CEO of Moral Injury Support Network for Service Women Incorporated. Welcome to the Moral Injury Support Network podcast. Today we have a great guest with us today, Dr. Pat Pernicano. She is a licensed psychologist who worked at the South Texas VA-MC, the Veterans Medical Clinic from 2017 to 2025, and co-developed Acceptance and Forgiveness Therapy, a group program for veterans. In 2025, she co-authored Healing Veteran Moral Injury Using Metaphor and Story to Foster Hope and Connection, and to help veterans share their stories and develop new narratives about self, others, and military experiences. She now returns to her earlier professional roots. She's focusing on the impact of parental trauma on children and families, whether through war, natural disaster, or other painful life events. Parents transmit emotional pain to their children. Veteran moral injury affects children and their development. To this end, she has self-published a picture book on Amazon to help children and families talk about emotional pain and move toward healing. She hopes to raise awareness of how parents' mental health affects children and impedes healthy development. Little Butterfly and Her Daddy: Healing the Pain of War is a gentle way of approaching a sensitive subject. Good day. How are you, Pat?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Um, I My earlier career was with traumatized kids and families and family reunification. And one of the things we became really aware of is how parents, how their moods, their behavior, their actions, how it affects kids. So recently I started checking articles and publications about what is the impact on children of war, of deployments, and of parent, PTSD, parent moral injury, and what do they know about how that can affect children's development. And so this little book came out of that concern, right? That children need an opportunity to talk about their concerns.
Yeah, and I think that's great. We recently in May, Gina, a partner of mine, friend of mine, and a colleague of mine, we did a continuing education event for licensed counselors on the effect of moral injury in families and different stressors on families. And Gina talked about the development of the brain throughout childhood and the different ways trauma affects the brain at different ages. So I definitely understand that it does have a big impact, and often childhood trauma can show up much later in years or become aware of it, right? It's sort of like in my own experiences, I went through a whole military career with a little bit of effects, but not really. I weren't aware of them as much. After I retired from the Army and started getting into some stressful situations I wasn't used to, trying to run a business and make that work without, without having a lot of formal experience in business or formal training and so on. Some of the traumatic things that I had to deal with went back to childhood, right?
Yeah.
And it surprised me because I thought, gosh, I'm 50 years old. So, so, it's like when they're young, they seem to, maybe it doesn't affect them as much, but it's still there. And it still can show up much later, right? If it's not treated or dealt with.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Myself also, I something will happen even now, and I'm older than 50, right? And then it'll trigger me right back to a memory, right? Of a childhood memory or a really core issue. For children of service members, one of the difficult things is the separation during deployment because kids deal with that in different ways. And sometimes, if they act out, they get labeled right, as having a behavior problem.
Right.
It's part of their worry about their parent being in a war zone. Um, there's also, if you look at children in war zones, right, there's being more and more written about children in Africa, Israel, Gaza, um, Afghanistan, and now the Ukraine. The children, not only are they traumatized by the war, but by parental loss sometimes, right? Or even
Mhm.
there's a problem with infrastructure that part of our security, right, is having a safe place to live, a safe place with our loved ones nurturing us. And that just gets all, quote, blown to hell, right? If you have
Right.
war that has out your neighborhood, your living area, and your
Right.
security can be undermined for a lifetime. Um, I remember when I was young and older, my parents had a habit of leaving without saying goodbye.
Mm.
And I remember, where's mom and dad? They already left. Babysitter's here, right? They left. And then when my daughter was 10, we were visiting with my parents, and my parents left while we were both in the bathroom. And she came out crying, like, where's Grandma and Grandpa? I'm so
Yeah.
sad. And we went running after them. My memory was
Yeah.
activated. It was like, we're gonna catch them, we're gonna make them say goodbye. Well, veterans, military members, if they're injured overseas and if they're in a war zone, they can't even tell you where they are.
Right.
And the children are home and they're reacting to the loss. They're reacting to however their guardian or caregiver is acting. And too often families don't talk about it. So the children are carrying this. You would never know it. They all handle
Right.
it differently.
Yeah, I think of when I think about this paradigm and the difficulty of it, I go back to attachment theory, which I think explains a lot for childhood things. And for those that don't know, but in a nutshell, attachment theory says the stronger your bond with your parents as a child, the more supportive,
Yeah,
loving, and caring they are, the more confident you become as a person, the more likely you are to take risks and do like set big goals because you know that you can always come back to your parents and they'll soothe you, comfort you, give you helpful advice, and so on. Whereas if you don't have that strong bond or your parents are abusive or not trustworthy or whatever, you're more likely to see the world as a fearful place without safety, without and so lower self-esteem, lower confidence, that affects a lot of things. So when you're thinking about children of veteran parents, or children of military parents, or in a military family, um, unless the parents are working really extra hard to try to help um,
reach
fill
out.
that gap or help with that, that's a natural sort of like challenge to this strong attachment because of the being
Yeah.
away, moving frequently, those kind of things.
Yeah, attachment from the day you're born, really. It's about survival, it's about security, it's about comfort,
Hmm.
it's about it's a secure place. So if you have a parent in the military during that attachment formation, birth to 3 or 4 years old, um, it can really threaten their sense of security, safety. Deployment's over, parent comes home.
Yeah,
So for about 10
right.
years, I've been listening to veteran stories, right, of how they're changed and the moral injury and how they're changed and how they react differently to their family members. And they don't notice. sometimes the
Right.
changes in
Right.
children, you know. So the kids, I'll show you this little book. It's a very endearing little book about a character who, she's a little girl, Butterfly. Her daddy comes back from war and his wings don't work. Good metaphor for daddy is
Yeah.
wrong, right? His wings are
Right.
torn up. He can't fly with me. It's about the attachment between her, he says, kind of leave me alone. This is a grown-up problem. And
Right.
she said, Daddy, it's my problem too. And it is.
Mm.
It becomes a family problem. And if the parent is withdrawn, feeling shame, depressed, traumatized,
Right.
then to the child's eyes, really, the child says, my parent has changed. It could be a mommy, it could be a he, a she, a them.
Right.
The caregiver has changed.
Right.
And you know what we know, Dan, about child development is children internalize their parents' emotional pain. And
Mm.
guess they blame themselves. They don't say what happened to daddy. They say, what did I do? Why
Right.
doesn't my parent love me the same? Why can't my
Right.
parent be with, right? And the child starts to get depressed. Research says they can internalize the mental health of their parent too. So the
Right.
parent's guilt, grief, depression, loss can be internalized by the child, and children will react in different ways, to that. And if the parent says, be quiet, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about it. In this little book, the daughter understands that her parent doesn't want to talk about it, but she knows that if he talked about it, he could get better. So it
Right.
kind of encourages the parent, the veteran, the military member to go talk to someone. Don't carry it alone. And it's done
Right.
in a way that is real approachable. Like the characters in the book are real, um, I don't know, they're kind of sweet. And Bloomsbury Press worked with me to create the illustrations and the characters. And, this little, you can't look at that without saying, oh,
Right. Right.
poor little girl, right? Um, and they go to visit, see, yes, it's a spider, and yes, she has
Right.
purple and green hair. And what she does is they tell her their problems and she wraps them up in spider silk and leaves them on her web so they
Mm.
have to carry them home. And
Yeah.
and kids get this. Um, I tested the book on my grandsons. We're visiting them, and I tested it because he's not a veteran, but he's a daddy who had a serious illness last year, and he was gone in the hospital for quite a while. And I know they worried about him, you know, and
Yeah.
he came home and um, I read them the book. My husband and I read them the book, and they were just rapt, like, oh, they love the characters, the cuteness of them. But then halfway through the book, the 4-year-old looked up and said, Grandpa, is the daddy gonna die?
Mm.
And we had not heard that, but in their
Yeah.
worldview, they had worried that their daddy was going to die.
Right.
And I think every child who hears the story will put it in their context. Whatever it is they have worried about and not shared with their parent, it opens up a conversation. It opens up a connection. It helps them talk about it because some families don't talk about the pain. They kind of bury it and
Right.
go on.
Right. Well, they're sort of for a lot of people shame
Yeah,
within themselves, within the household. A certain some cultures, some cultural ideas are make it create a barrier for people to share for sure. Is the was your primary approach that parents and kids would sit down and read this together? Is that how you envision how this works?
I envision that a parent would read the book with a child, or an older child might pick it up and read it themselves, you know.
Yeah,
And then there's an addendum at the end of the book that asks a set of questions, like discussion questions. So if a parent wants to have a discussion with the child, they can ask them one of those questions. Um, like, is there a time you worried about your mommy or daddy? Is there a time when you had something and wanted to share it with someone, right? Um, I think one of the easiest questions is if you went to Samantha Spider to tell
yeah,
her problem, right? If you went to her, what would you tell her? What do you want her to wrap up for you? And kids will come up with their own, whatever they're carrying inside, it's going to come out.
right,
They're going to share it. I also, though, envision that it could be read at a library. They have those little book groups. So you might have a caregiver and a child at a library, and they're having a
right.
book time. Some teachers have told
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
teachers want to read it to their classrooms or a Sunday school classroom. They want to read it
yeah,
to the kids and have
right.
discussion, right? So I think
Yeah,
could be used different ways. A therapist would certainly read the book with a child and not only do some of the questions, but go into play. Because play therapy, that's a child's way of communicating.
right,
Younger children have less words, they have more play. So there's
right.
a set of suggested play activities to use with a younger child.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could certainly see like in a place, say Fayetteville, North Carolina, where there are tons of veteran families or military families. I could see like a teacher using that or a school counselor, that kind of thing. Because I mean, in the education system, we need better tools for in North Carolina and maybe nationwide. We have Purple Star families, Purple Star schools that are military friendly. They meet a certain criteria, but I still think there's a lack of tools that they're often able to provide teachers to identify even what might be happening with military kids
Yeah.
due to deploy. And they don't always. Some deployments, like everybody knows, like the 82nd is deploying or something, but in at Fort Bragg, there's a lot of special operators. They're not saying anything when they're deploying. So a teacher may think, well, there's not a lot of deployments happening. The kids are okay, but you don't really know. I mean, they could be children of special operators. There's always secret stuff happening, and a lot of military families have had deployments in the past, and that has some lingering sort of challenges and stressors, right?
Yeah, kids pick up on secrecy. You made a good point. Kids can tell if you're keeping a secret, and even if it's for their own good or it's because of military guidelines, right, for special ops,
Right,
the kids pick up on that level of intensity, some of the tension. So,
right,
I think a military school or counseling center, that'd be a good place. um, Years ago, I had a different story with Little Butterfly, but she still had Samantha Spider who still wrapped up things. And there was a boy there. And I was thinking of how in a military classroom, you could have an activity and each child could put on a little piece of paper something they were carrying that they bothered them about something about their family or their mom or dad.
Yeah.
And then, put it on the paper or draw a picture of it. Some of them might be too young to really use words, and they don't have to tell everyone else. But then he wrapped it up, this young man. He was an abused kid who was living in a group home. He turns out he wrote down something about his abuser, and then he wrapped it up and he used duct tape to make a cocoon. And he wrapped it and wrapped it and wrapped it and wrapped it. And then he stomped on it. And he goes, "So there." And then he stuck it on a spider web and left it at the office. Um, so kids in a classroom, I could even see kids making their own cocoons and having one of those Halloween webs on the wall, and they could leave something behind, and not take it home.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are a lot of great ideas that I think one of the difficulties, and that's what we're trying to do with our organization too, is get more of this into the school systems, and that can be tricky. Schools are education systems already, and teachers are already so burdened with things to do, and it can be a bit of a closed system in some ways. But I think getting more of these kind of like simple tools available for in the school system for either counselors or teachers, that sort of thing, especially at the younger level in your elementary grades, there's a lot of story time and storytelling, and it's not as you get into middle school and high school, it's like much more crammed with educational standards that have to be met and so on. But if we
Yeah,
could work
elementary.
even at the younger level, get them like get families being a little more functional in this way and more open, you'd prevent problems in the middle school and high school and later levels, I think.
Yeah, I think if you give them the roots, the beginning, if you, otherwise children draw faulty conclusions. Um, they can start to think like their parents are thinking, like that the
Right,
world is scary, right? That
right,
that you can't trust anyone, that you might have someone break into your house. I mean, if they go to bed and they see dad going around the house or mom going around the house, locking all the windows, locking all the doors, checking the perimeter, you know, the kids start to feel like the world is not safe. Their
yeah,
inner world, that security.
yeah, yeah,
And if a caregiver comes back and let's say they're really grouchy, they get angry easily, then a child often thinks, oh, I'm walking on eggshells. I don't want to bother them.
right,
I don't want
right,
to upset them. And they can start to get angry or sad or mad, or worried. And those can last a long time if the service member or the veteran doesn't get help. Um, it's not always the veteran. I guess I could make the point that whatever field your parent is in, it's pretty common in first responders, right?
right,
That they are affected by trauma. Medical providers are affected
right,
by what they see, especially there's some research about COVID and the fact that people who worked during COVID felt helpless, um, felt upset with themselves. They thought they should have been able to heal people or cure people.
right,
And there was a time when we didn't have enough gear. We didn't have enough
right,
over in the Ukraine too, they didn't have enough medical equipment to do what they needed to do. Um, they're finding too that clergy and chaplains, they can carry a lot because
Right.
they hear everybody else's story, and they are
Right.
few people that service members are comfortable going to because it's confidential, you know?
Right.
So they're carrying all this hidden pain and trying to just deal with it, push through it. So when they go home, they're they need some help with their families, because they're dealing with a lot of grief.
Right.
Therapists, we have our own share of
Sure.
vicarious trauma,
Sure.
you know.
Even researchers can have that because first started interviewing women veterans about their moral injury experiences, I was um,
Blown away.
I couldn't sleep. I was having some real difficulties. And what helped me is like to space out the interviews where I would only do one or two a week. And that would give me time to like sort of process what I was hearing and my own feelings and whatever. But
Yeah,
so,
it is
so anyone who is hearing these stories or helping people or in like these traumatic situations can be affected, for sure. And then that sort of gets brought home, and
definitely.
it's part of the challenges too, right? What I like about this book is that, you know, if your children are young, it's only, I mean, there's a safety issue. You don't want to talk to them. There's some things you don't want to talk to them about, or at least there's a way to talk to them about it that doesn't, you know, when you're talking about woundedness and these kind of things, like you have to be careful with the language when they're speaking to a younger child. So a book like yours is designed to give right parents and kids language around these difficult concepts.
Yeah, you make a couple of really, really good points because I relate to that when I was first working in trauma. Um, it can create some sleepless nights because you do find yourself thinking about what they've been through, right?
Hmm.
And for children, um, when I worked with children that were abused and neglected, some of those stories will pop into my head. I remember, but with kids, they tend to get better more quickly if you give them the opportunity, right, to talk about it, to deal with it. Um, Something I mention in the book is, we don't talk to children about, war trauma. It would scare them. It's
Right,
by TV,
right,
some PG-13 guidelines.
right,
And you don't talk to the child about, blowing up someone or dropping a drone bomb on someone. You just say something bad happened.
right,
And I was in a bad time, a bad place. Something bad happened. It scared me. I felt
right,
bad, you know. Um, and the child will say how they felt when you were gone. And so the focus isn't really on the adult, it's more on the child and whatever the child experienced, that absence, how the child experiences the changes in the caregiver, because
right,
children are going to open up their feelings if given a chance, or if you watch carefully, they play it out. They
right,
the battle inside them, right? They're trying to conquer their own feelings of weakness when my grandson turns into a mad dinosaur. When he's mad, he becomes a terrible creature, right? Who goes around and tries to destroy other dinosaurs. It's their way of dealing with their feelings. Um, but I think the book is gentle, deliberately gentle, but suggestive, right? And it doesn't guide or lead. It's suggestive that, when I experience a change in my caregiver, right, I feel sad. In fact, the little butterfly in the book, she made a list. Someone told her if you write down the things that are on your mind, right, it can help. So why don't you make a list of the things before Daddy went to war and now after? And what do you miss? And how is it different? And then
Oh,
share that with the giver, and children will go, they'll make their list, they'll draw pictures. Look, mommy, look, daddy, look. And if
yeah,
the parent is, listening carefully, they're going to learn more about their child's inner world. Um, they'll be surprised. Like we were
right.
surprised when my grandson, is the daddy butterfly gonna die? How long do butterflies live, Grandma? Do they, is he gonna be okay? And it was like, he's okay. He's getting help. He's healing his wings. And then at the end of the story, he's flying again, and they're flying together. It's about the attachment, and they're happy together again. So that's the goal, is to have the parent-child attachment strengthened, right? By reading the book, by letting the child express him or herself.
Right. Well, it's great. So where can parents or teachers or therapists get the book?
The best place right now is just to go to Amazon and to look up, Little Butterfly and Her Daddy, and it's going to pop right up.
Okay.
Uh, I believe it's 12.95, and I think Barnes and Noble has asked for, this was pretty overwhelming. They want to put 10 books in each of their 753 stores
Oh,
across.
wow.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
So Bloomsbury is going to get them printed, and the intention is that they'll have them for the holiday season. So like November, December, and if
Yeah.
they sell those books, they're using it like a trial. So go to Barnes and Noble in November or December and get a book as a gift for someone else. There are friends of mine buying them and donating them to their public library, to their
Yeah.
school council. My brother
Yeah.
was a school music teacher. He's donating them to the school librarian and the counselor. So just share them. And I think people will be pleased at, I'm so thrilled and want to thank Bloomsbury for, we collaborated. So I was able to describe what I wanted for illustrations, and I think you will find the characters are quite endearing. I look at them, and you've seen the cover,
Yeah.
Daniel. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that
Yeah.
feeling. And
Yeah.
it just does that to all of us, because we need some stories that are sweet and have a happy ending. And
Right.
I want to say one thing. There's a few books out there. I don't want to, there's books about Daddy went to war or whatever, but they're more intellectual,
Mm.
written to educate children about what happens in a deployment, what is a
Right.
uniform, how does my daddy do his job, or my mommy, what, but it's a teaching for the books that are out there, and how I feel. My daddy's a soldier, or my mommy's a soldier, right? But This
Right.
one is a relation. It is written to be interpersonal. It's written to be based on the relationship of the child and a caregiver, and a time when the caregiver is troubled and the child is picking up on that. And I think it could be parents who have cancer could read this with their children. Um, if you've had a loss in the family, you know, um, if you've had, daddy comes home and mommy comes home and they lost a patient at the hospital, you know.
Mm.
Now in the Ukrainian, um, there's a colleague of mine, he's a chaplain, PhD. He goes to the Ukraine and does workshops with service members, hospital workers, chaplains, families, and I've sent him the book to just take with him. And if there's an opportunity to read it with children, get a group of parents and kids together, those kids really need some extra support.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I think it's great what you're doing. I'm glad to hear that it's getting some traction and is getting distributed out there. And we're happy to help with this podcast by explaining and giving you a chance to. I think it's great that the work you're doing will have links on our website and all that. But for those listeners who are listening, maybe in your car, whatever, um, you've got the information. You can Google it. You can find it on Amazon. And it's great having you with us, Pat, and love to have you in a few months and give us an update on how things are going.
Thank you.
Maybe after the holidays, and you could tell me millions of copies have been sold. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm really thankful and grateful that, that it's going to be out there and available. Um, and it could become, you say it invites more work because then I'll have to keep them supplied. If
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
thank
It's a nice problem to have, though.
really appreciate you picking this up and sharing my interest in this topic of the children.
Yeah, I think it's really important, for many women veterans are single parents, and so this gives them a way to help talk about some things and have in many of the women veterans I've worked with, they're with young kids, they're struggling to talk to the kids and kids are having some like me acting out maybe at school and that kind of thing, but it's just trying to process, trying to sort out kids not even really understanding what's going on in their own mind necessarily. So this is just another tool that really helps parents,
And open and
prove
not
things. Yeah.
open the door, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes mommy veterans try to protect. I don't want to be stereotyped, but the moms
Yeah.
want to maintain uh, some peace for the kids, but in trying to protect, they can overprotect. Uh,
Right.
the daddy veterans avoid. Many of them just get busy. It's as they
Yeah.
work,
Right.
sure they spend more time alone. And so this will bring people together.
Yeah. I
They,
think so.
okay, I got a tool now, right? I got
Right.
to open the door.
Right. All right, Pat. Well, it's great again, great talking to you. And we'll have this episode out here in a couple of days. And I hope we get uh millions of listeners
Thanks.
getting this information, getting the book. So
Thanks,
until
Daniel. I
next time. Yep.
appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye.